The scene opens up where a protagonist was playing a game, and he finally soloed the boss. Then, he felt that he was unbeatable in Lasfin, and he had been logged in for 100 hours, which was bad. So, he needed to get some rest, and before that, he decided to check the rewards. While he clicked, he found himself somewhere else and pondered where he was. He was confused if it was some kind of bug or error, and suddenly he realized that he could not remove the console. He could not even log out. Stunned, he wondered if he was in some kind of novel, and if a death game was about to begin. Suddenly, a girl held him from behind while confronting him so as not to panic. Stunned, he asked who she was, and she introduced herself as Seluinen. She greeted him while calling him Bide, and inquired if she should call him Yanagi Toru. Toru was astonished that she knew his name and mentioned that she was helping the admin's avatar. Seluinen laughed and inquired if he still thought that was the world of Last Fantasy. She explained to him that he died from playing games too much, and so she guessed what they called the other side. She added to rest assured and mentioned that it was a great opportunity for gamers who died after playing too much. It was an invitation to reincarnate in the world of sword and magic, Krenneklum, a second chance in life. Disappointed, Toru asked about the reincarnate while mentioning that he was just a deadbeat who only plays video games outside of his part-time job. She agreed that was the reason why she, the god of games, found him so interesting. In addition, she would even add a blessing or what his people call a cheat for him, and Toru requested her to do so. She giggled while stating that she didn't like that he was loyal to his desire, and she snapped her fingers while mentioning to do it quickly. The next second, Toru found himself in a different place and figured that they were able to reincarnate without any problem. He called for Seluinen, and she showed up and mentioned that since she couldn't stay there too long, she would keep that brief. First, she decided to talk about the fun part, the blessing, and started to give him the power of the game he loved to use in that world. Toru got excited, and she added that she would make some adjustments to the specifications to fit that world. She would replicate as best as she could. Toru contemplated if that meant Rasfin ability and smirked that if he had his most powerful avatar, then rare skill as much as he could take for countertop status, legendary weapons, and armor with forbidden curse. Nobody has done that much in that game, and it was the best and strongest he's ever had. He imagined himself as a peerless warrior coming from another world and applauded by everyone. Just then, she mentioned to give him her blessings and she bonked something onto Toru's face. Toru looked while wondering if it was a card case, and she inquired if it wasn't the game he loved. For a moment, Toru looked and mentioned that he liked it too. He smashed it in frustration that it was not that one but the card game one. He wept that Lasfin would have been better, and she smiled, mentioning that she had never said anything about the game he just played. He asked if she did that on purpose, and she laughed, stating that becoming peerless through cheat was not that interesting. Toru retorted that MMM was once a popular TCG and asked how he was supposed to survive with a piece of paper. Ignoring the question, she mentioned that it was time to start the tutorial. She explained that the first was the card binder, and he could use that to check on various things, like purchasing cards. She added that she would give him a free pack this time and asked him to try it out. All he needed to do was think about it, and it would come out. Toru contemplated buying the pack, and she suggested that he think of it, and the card would put itself in the binder on its own. At times like that, it was just like a VR game. Another item was his departure gift, and he picked one of those, Lemuria's. That was the reason he started playing MMM, and he mentioned that it wasn't a very useful card, but he kept it in his deck and used it all the time. Then, Seluinen asked if he was a dog person or a cat person. He mentioned that it was abrupt and stated that if he had to say, then it was a dog. One card shines too brightly, and a girl appears there. Toru got stunned and asked about the girl. She stated that she would add that child too, and her name was Waf. She would take care of cooking, laundry, and crafting. She was also physically strong, so in battle, she might come in handy. She stated that it was a question mark. Waf said she would be of great use to him and added that he could count on her. Toru requested not to call him master, mentioning that it makes him sound like a pervert. Waf, filled with tears, asked if she couldn't. Toru turned his head, mentioning that he had no choice, contemplating that if he said no, the atmosphere there would be bad. Waf smiled while thanking the master. Seluinen hesitated and asked to move on if all things were settled. She instructed Toru to first deploy a card from the deck and to pick one of those monster cards. She told him to try using the card and to think summon. He retorted that he understood. He pondered, summon, Grey Wolf, and the wolf was summoned. He was amazed that the picture on the card really came out, and Waf excitedly called it amazing. Toru wondered if he summoned Lemuria's, maybe she would be right in front of him. She apologized for interrupting the excitement and added that it might be hard to do. He asked why, and she told him that he had to draw the card from the deck first, and he would need enough mana. Toru inquired about the mana and was explained that the number on the back of his right hand was the mana he had, even in the original MMM, and it would have required a summoning cost. She added that he would get 1 mana per day and advised him to keep in mind that it was not that easy. Just then, the wolf came closer to him and licked his finger. Selunin added that he was absolutely obedient. Toru commanded the wolf to sit, and the wolf obeyed. They shook hands, and the wolf sat down. They laughed, mentioning that the wolf was so cute despite his looks. Waff said she was jealous that the master gave orders to him. Suddenly, a group of kobolds appeared, and Toru got worried about what they were. He was told that they were kobolds, weak on their own, but troublesome when using tools and grouping together. Just then, the wolf came in front, and Toru commanded the gray wolf to attack. He contemplated that even if the gray wolf attacked, there were 3 kobolds, and the remaining 2 would attack directly. Selunin asked Toru to take a look first, and the wolf attacked the kobolds, killing them. Toru inquired why one gray wolf attacked all the kobolds, as it was unlike the game and not turn-based. She agreed and stated that was it for the tutorial, wishing him good luck, and then she disappeared. Toru looked for his achievements of trials and wondered if it was his current objective, noticing that there were many of them. He pondered if there was something necessary and easy to clear right then. He patted Waff and stated that they needed to get a base, and she rogered that. Thrice of them moved on their way, and Waff was sitting over the wolf. Toru contemplated that she was having a good time, but he was frustrated about Selunin leaving without saying something before she disappeared. Just then, the wolf howled, and Toru asked what that was. The wolf rushed, and he followed it after asking if Waff was alright. She stated that she was fine, and he noticed there was a rabbit. He stated that he could eat it if he cooked it. Promptly, Waff asked him to leave it to her, and he was stunned that she could. Waff agreed and added that horned rabbit was a tasty ingredient. She started cutting it and chopped down the rabbit. She wrapped the unused meat in leaves to keep it from spoiling and make it easy to carry around. She gave the innards to the wolf, and Toru comprehended that summoned beasts also needed to eat. Since the horn looked like it could be used for something, they took it with them. They consumed the food, and Bide mentioned they filled their bellies. They would go to the stupidly tall tower to the north or the big rock to the south. They concluded they would go to the south as it seemed closer, and Waff rogered it. Toru was reminded that he hadn't received his reward for completing the trials yet. He checked and pondered if the card rewarded besides mana and points. The reward was Kobold Explorer, a red attribute card. MMM had 6 different attribute colors, and to perform a summon, he needed the corresponding attribute mana or universal mana. The deck Selunin gave him was mainly green, and the content was similar to the first beginner green deck he bought. The Grey Wolf was one of the green decks, the lowest rarity C, but it had 2 attacks for 1 summoning mana, which was very cost-effective. It was one of the cards that served him well during his active days. Waff stated they would come out to some sort of large clearing. He added that it looked even bigger up close, and she called it amazing. They stepped forward, and he stated that the upper part was mossy. He wondered if there was a tree at the top. Just then, he looked behind, and a blast happened. He got hit by it. Stunned, he opened his eyes and wondered if he died, but he didn't feel any pain. He surprisingly looked at his fist and figured that the numbers on his left hand were his life barrier in the original game. If that was cut down to 0, he lost. He thought about that world, and if it reached 0, he might die immediately or could still fight if his body was unharmed. Even if it reached 0, at least for 19 damage, he should be able to take the attack like he does then. He wondered if it was a sudden boss fight as his 3 points were taken away at once. Waff, with teary eyes, stated that she would fight for him, but he warned her that it was dangerous and told her to stay there. The wolf howled, and Toru smirked. He stated that even though he was in that situation, he was a little excited and mentioned to do that with that one deck. Based on the reduced life barrier and its size, he would say that its attack was 3 or even 4. Even though numbers weren't everything like in the game, the Grey Wolf wouldn't stand a chance if it goes head-to-head with that. If that was the case, he consumed Universal Mana, activated Seal of Physical Reinforcement, and commanded the wolf to attack. The wolf plunged to attack, but it was counterattacked by the boss. Toru noticed that the card was replenished over there. He wondered if it was because he used a spell card and considered it as no good, as he didn't have enough mana to use it. He stated that he was counting on the Grey Wolf. The wolf furiously stared at the boss, rushed, and attacked it. The wolf smacked it down, howled furiously, and pushed the boss down, killing it. Toru cheered and mentioned that he did it. The wolf was exhausted due to the fight, and Waff ran towards and applauded him, saying that he fought well protecting their master. Toru thanked the wolf as he saved them. The card reverted, and Toru comprehended that when the monster dies, it reverts back to a card, and the trial was accomplished. He stated that he didn't care even at times like that and asked if there was an achievement for defeating a named monster. Waff agreed and explained that it was a monster that had grown uniquely among its kind and acquired its own individual name. As Toru expected, it was a wonder how he managed to beat it on his second battle. He contemplated that with 5 other trials accomplished, the total was 5 universal mana. He had not seen that card in the original MMM. He wondered if it was original to that world, and he was curious about the remaining achievement. There was a card which generates mana every day. He pondered if he got a card apart from the reward, and that hog used to rule that land. He guessed the card was proof of ownership, and he figured that he actually got 1 green mana. Then he summoned Necklace of Green Earth, which also generated green mana. It looked like it could generate 1 green mana with no problem, and he would have to check the timing of every turn when his mana regenerated later. Also, the card that he could use by hand, Balt's Forest Guard, had the additional special effect of spawning another Balt's beast. They appeared, and Waff stated that they looked strong. Toru mentioned that with those 2 monsters stronger than the Grey Wolf, they wouldn't lose against those demons. The card he drew was Seal of Physical Reinforcement, and he would save his mana for later. Then, he mentioned checking around the rocks, and Waff agreed. On the way, she stated that the mighty beast Baltz found something on the other side. He pondered that one of them goes back to call, and the other one was on watch. 2 of them were more useful than he thought they would be, and they discovered a cave. They entered the cave, and Toru stated that the cave was bigger than he thought. They could use that place as a base, and so obtaining a base was cleared. Waff clapped and stated that he was the lord of that kingdom. In the morning, he looked at his fist and mentioned that it looked like his universal mana was properly recovering by 1 overnight. He also recovered 1 life barrier to 18, and the Necklace of Green Earth was usable again. He wondered if that meant 1 turn meant 1 day and started to roam and find a river that day as they had more mana to spare. Waff asked about a river, and he answered that if they were lucky, they should be able to find a town or village. They couldn't keep eating wild food all the time. He looked at cards and mentioned that he wasn't sure that he was comfortable with having only a Baltz beast on his side. He would like to get more for exploring. He summoned a Grey Wolf, and the drawn card was an Ivy Rat. He thought that one might come in handy too, and he summoned Mimic Treant, a monster plant, to defend their base. Then he asked Mimic if it could camouflage itself right away, and it replied Manhwa. It did it by hitting upside, and Toru was skeptical that it was camouflaged, but that was just way too unnatural. Then, they prepared to go and move forward. On the way, Toru looked and found that there were edibles. Waff called him and stated that it looked like the wolf had found something. He followed Waff, and there was a deer, which was huge. Toru contemplated that if they could get it, they might not have to worry about meat for a while. Looking at its size, he would say that it would be a close match for the Baltz beast. He wondered if he should use Killer Wasp, but the poison could ruin the meat. He wanted to save the physical enhancement as a trump card in case of emergency. Finally, he decided to use the Ivy Rat there. He commanded the Ivy Rat while hiding behind the bushes. He pondered that he would use Ivy Rat's ability to block its movement and Baltz beasts surround it from the left and right. He commanded the Grey Wolf to stay there and added that he was counting on it when the time came. He made the plan and commanded it to execute it. All did the same, and they tied up the deer, but it broke down the ropes and growled. Toru was confused about what that was. Something hit the wolf, and there was a blast, but they were saved. Toru mentioned that he supposed that meant it wouldn't be that easy. Then, Toru ordered Baltz to go, and they went and bit the deer. The deer reverted, and Baltz was pushed backward. Baltz ran away, as Toru thought it would choose to run away. He told Ivy to do it as he planned. Baltz was aiming for the horns, and he broke the horn. Toru stated that its horn was broken, so the ray of light should no longer fire. He commanded Baltz to finish it, and it did the same, and the head of the deer was beheaded. Then, Waff was doing the chores, and he stated that they had accomplished most of the food trials. The reward was 3 universal mana and a card. Waff stated that any further dismantling would be difficult and to give the rest to the monsters for their meal. They got back on the way, and Baltz howled at someone. Toru asked if there was another deer, but he spotted a human who was down. He stepped towards the human and knew that she was a girl. He remembered that just being with a girl makes him nervous, his bitter memories that come back to life. He concluded that it was not the time to say that, and he moved forward and asked the girl if she was all right. She mumbled that she was hungry. Toru got stunned and offered her food, and she took a bite. She called the food delicious and added that she had never tasted anything that good before. Waff gave her water. The girl started eating the food quickly, and Toru advised her that she could eat slower. He pondered that he couldn't do it, and he was so nervous. Because Waff was in the mascot role, might be that's why he was fine with her. He told her that after she finished eating, they would go back to the base. When he was about to talk about belts, the girl got frightened and called it a demon. Toru requested her to calm down, and they got back to the base. To summarize, her name was Emil, and she was just an ordinary village girl. She was kidnapped by a gang of thieves who were after the harvest festival. Just before being used as a plaything for the bandit, she was saved by an elderly slave. Waff inquired what happened to the old man, and she stated that she didn't know. She added that after they escaped, they were unlucky enough to be spotted by kobolds. At that point, the old man said that he would act as a decoy, and they became separated. Then she collapsed, and they found her. Toru mentioned that he understood and she should take a rest then and thanked her. Toru assumed that it was not the same kobold they met on the first day, and Waff agreed and stated that maybe there was a kobold settlement nearby. Toru mentioned that whether they fought or fled, it was better to know the location and size of the settlement. He summoned Killer Wasp, a monster insect, and told it that he needed it to look for the kobold settlement from the sky. He warned it not to push itself too hard, and the first priority was to return safely. Wasp agreed and flew. Toru mentioned that they were going to be busy the next day, and Waff cursed Kobold to must die, and there was no mercy for him. Then, he summoned tree armor, and it wrapped around Waff. She mentioned that her body felt light. Toru added that while he had a barrier, Waff would need some armor. According to a Killer Wasp's report, there was a kobold settlement across the river, more than 30 of them. They decided to scout the settlement. Then he just needed to use the horns of a horned rabbit as a spearhead, and he agreed. Waff could turn the armor into a bracelet just by thinking, and he stated that he would leave the Baltz beast and Mimic Treant as her escort. He told Emil to wait there. Emil requested him to be careful, and he agreed and mentioned seeing her later. They moved forward to the forest. Emil was not in the base, and Baltz was down, and Toru got tensed where she was. As he expected, there was an under-attack when the card came back in the case. He wondered where Emil was and hoped for her to get away safely. Waff exclaimed that Emil might have been kidnapped, and Toru reminded that kobolds were a cruel race, as they tortured people they kidnapped and played with them. Just then, Waff found something, and they followed the wolf. The one monster was lying there, hit in the leg and left behind. By the looks of it, it seemed like a regular kobold, and it wouldn't be enough to defeat a Baltz token or a Mimic Treant. Just then, a kobold lunged over to attack, but Toru saved himself with the barrier. The barrier broke, and he pushed the kobold back. Just then, the wolf came to strike, but Toru told it to hold back. He wondered that even though there was a life barrier, he really just got hit in the neck. It was a head on murderous intent, and it would bleed on death if left alone. Alternatively, he could order the gray wolf to kill it, but that does not mean that he had not won against the fear called murderous intent. Kreneklum was not the same world he used to live in, where he could avoid danger. If he was going to live in that world, he had to take a stand there and then to not get himself killed for his survival. He noticed that his hands were shaking as he held the weapon and struck down the kobold. Everything was blurred to him, and he thought that he wouldn't end up like that. Suddenly, Waff came and praised him, adding that she was so proud to be able to serve a strong master. Toru stated that all he did was finish the job, and they would go after the one who took Emil. He asked the gray wolf if it knew Emil's smell, and it howled. Toru and the gray wolf were running. He asked if it was close and spotted a kobold and a person. The man attacked the kobold and killed it. Stunned, Toru looked behind, and the man asked who he was. Toru requested the man to wait and stated that he would come out. He indicated everyone, including Waff, to wait there. Then, he came out and stated that they were not suspicious. Suspicious, the man added that there was something highly suspicious, including whatever Toru was hiding. There was no reason to bring a child to do evil. The man introduced himself as Zed Gardman, a former knight of the kingdom. He told Toru to take the child and get out of there right then as a huge kobold appeared. Toru was astonished, and Zed told him that he would buy him some time. He stepped forward to attack, stating that sacrificing one's life for the sake of the young was the duty of an old guard. Toru and Waff called him Master, and he commanded the Baltz beast to go ahead and take care of the small kobolds. The killer wasp would distract the large ones while giving Baltz beast support, and the ivy rat could interrupt and deflect large kobold attacks at will. The gray wolf would protect him, and Waff mentioned that she would go too. He ordered her to stay, and she got distressed. They got together, and he commanded the attack. When the kobold was about to attack and growled, Zed swung the sword, sticking it into the kobold's mouth, and it died. Toru came and asked if he was alright. Zed asked about Toru's companion, and Toru mentioned to think of them as his servants. Then, Zed asked if he was a magician, and Toru mentioned that his name was Toru, not you. Zed stated that he understood and thanked Toru for his assistance. Toru exclaimed that they would get through that mess together. Toru mentioned that he would go to attack and would leave the others to him, but he needed not to push himself too hard, and Toru agreed. Then, Toru mentioned that he would give the orders, and he commanded first to Grey Wolf to aim for the smaller one. The wolf did the same, and as expected, the smaller one wasn't much of an enemy just like before. Toru thought that might be they could kill the bigger one right away, and stated to try it. Then, he ordered the Grey Wolf to go ahead and attack the big one too, and the wolf jumped to attack. But Kobold punched the wolf at his face, and Toru got stunned. He concluded that Guy's movement and reaction was totally different from the smaller one, and he asked if Grey Wolf was right, and it howled. Toru contemplated that Grey Wolf couldn't move, that seemed like it wasn't damage, and in that case, he wanted to use Ivy Rat to stop the movement, but it looked like that sword would cut that it would not work. The fight between Zed was consistently going, and is expected of Old Man, but it wasn't hard to fight two at the same time. And Toru was amazed that the old man was able to stand on his own 2 against 1 and to break the balance. Ivy Rat head over there to support him, and when there was a chance, the old man slashed Kobold into 2 parts. Then, Zed noticed an Ivy Rat and mentioned that the little warrior saved his life. Suddenly, another Kobold attacked the old man, but he dodged the attack, and Toru commanded the beast and Grey Wolf to keep moving and to distract that Kobold. At the same time, when the others were doing well, the killer wasp flew and attacked onto Kobold's eyes. The Kobold was growling in pain, and Toru commanded to finish it off. So, Grey Wolf with others attacked together, and the Kobold was dead. Toru turned and stated that they pulled it off somehow, and he saw Old Man already taken care of. But the old man was lying there injured. Zed mentioned that it looked like Toru events as well while pressing his wounds. They asked him about the wound, and Zed mentioned that he got it just before they came there. Just then, Zed mumbled while apologizing to Email, and stunned, Toru asked if he just said Emil. Waff, while looking at the wound, stated that the bleeding looked like it was a pretty deep wound. She added that ordinary treatment wouldn't help much, and Toru told her to wait. He flexed his cards and chose one of the life recovery, which was used to restore a monster's health. But he used tree armor on Waff, so perhaps that was also helpful. Unlike in 3000, in Kreneklam, where lives were at stake, a recovery card was invaluable. But what would happen if they didn't use it there? He used the life recovery card on the old man. The card shined, and it looked like it worked. Waff cheered and stated that then she also had to do her best. She mentioned trying her best to clean up the bloody clothes and cast the spell Choyahi. Toru asked what that was, and she explained that it was a purification spell to remove dirt. Zed told Waff to do it on him too, and she agreed. The spell casted, and Toru asked Zed if his wound still hurt. He denied and mentioned that he was more energized than he had been in a long time and smiled. Just then, Zed bowed and thanked him. Toru requested the old man to raise his head and to thank Waff too. The old man thanked Waff too, and she stretched herself and stated that once again, he was Zed Guardman, a former royal knight. He mentioned that Toru could call him Zed. Toru mentioned that he had a question and asked about Emil. Zed asked if Toru knew Emil, and he agreed. He mentioned talking about it while they walked. Zed noticed that his group had been protecting her, but when they came back a little while ago, they had kidnapped her, so they were tracking it, and they met. Toru asked why Old Man Zed wanted to help Emil, and Zed stated that this was the duty of a knight. Toru stated that Old Man Zed was not a knight anymore, so there was no need to. Zed explained to him that being a knight was not an occupation but a way of life. Zed then asked Toru why he wanted to save Emil. Toru mentioned that if he could save a life, he would do it, and he didn't want to just sit back and let her die. Zed stated that it seemed like Toru was also a knight himself. Toru told him to stop, and Zed laughed and stated that there was no need to be so modest. Then, Toru stated that he could understand why the old man Zed wanted to save Emil and asked how a knight like him could end up as a slave. Zed asked if Emil told him that, and he agreed. Zed stated that if even he told him, it was not that interesting, and he pointed and stated to do that after they rescue Emil. Emil was inside as she was kidnapped, and she opened her eyes and found Kobold in front of her. Just as she spotted a skeleton and got frightened, afraid, she requested and was screaming for help. Just then, Grey Wolf with others plunged to attack and they directed onto Kobold. On the other side, Toru stabbed another Kobold, and he told others to keep ready as the others must have heard the commotion and were on the way there. Just then, the other kobolds came and were on one side, and Toru and his group were on their side. Zed mentioned that they needed to figure out how to get Emil out of there, and judging from the number of the medium-sized ones, his estimate of the herd size would be between 30 and 40, counting the scavenging outside forces that both he and he killed. If he subtracted it, their number in there would probably be no more than 20. Zed added that he knew Toru was getting worked up since they were almost there, but that would prevent him from winning what he could win. And Toru agreed as he said. Toru took a deep breath and told Zed to continue. He mentioned that they didn't know what they would do with Emil, and so Toru's group would attack the settlement from the front, and he would sneak in and rescue Emil, which means that would be a two-sided operation. As that was a dangerous task, he asked Toru if he was up for it. Toru contemplated that Zed estimated that his strength was more than enough to fight against the remaining forces, and, moreover, if they wanted to rescue Emil quickly, then that might be the best way to do it, and he agreed that he would do it. Zed mentioned to carry on the task, but Toru told him that he would wait and added that if he was going to find Emil, it would be better if he had someone with a good nose with him, and he summoned Wolf with him and requested him to take that guy with him. Zed thanked him and mentioned that he would borrow it and stated that once he found Emil and managed to rescue her, he would send that guy back to Toru with the message, and Toru told Zed to not die, and he agreed and mentioned that he wouldn't. They left, and Toru was fighting with Kobold. The Baltz beast snapped, and Toru thanked them for help. He commanded ivy rats to put some ivy around their feet, and the rat did the same. The kobolds were having difficulties, and just then Toru shouted while commanding a grey wolf, Baltz beast, and killer wasp to kill them. They all struck down collectively. Toru pondered that at that rate, they would be able to take out the kobolds in that settlement. It was roughly in line with the old man's estimation of their strength. As expected of a former royal knight, he smirked, but he controlled himself not to let his guard down. That also means he would be able to meet up with Old Man Zed sooner than he thought. Suddenly, he noticed a big kobold and figured that there were still some of them in the settlement. He called the Baltz beast and told them that he would leave the big one to them, hold it off until he summoned more backup. They summoned, but the big kobold beheaded the Baltz beast and growled furiously. Stunned, Toru contemplated killing Baltz beasts in a single blow. Clearly, it was much stronger than normal big ones. That thing was surely the boss there, and that's one hell of a hammer to wield with that figure. He could also say the same about that left hand and that black haze around him. He wondered if it was faint distortion or if it was some kind of bud, and it definitely was not normal. Just then, Toru noticed that the others were back. That means the boss was the only one left. He commanded others not to overdo it and to keep it busy for now. He took his cards and contemplated that excluding the one coming with the old man, he had Grey Wolf, Ivy Rat, and Killer Wasp. The one that he summoned from his hand would be that. Then, he summoned Mimicstreant and told Ivy Rat and Mimicstreant to restrain it, and Killer Wasp to poison the big kobold. It ignored their restraint ability and kept attacking. He was frustrated that he still couldn't get over the mindset from the card game, but he had a trump card with him. It was the physical enhancement that had defeated the Boulder Hog before. He commanded the Grey Wolf to go, but the boss kobold broke down the restraints using only force, and all were affected by it. Toru thought that the Mimictreant and Ivy Rat were injured as he had used his mana, and only the Grey Wolf was left. He wondered if they could win that fight. He told the wolf that they needed to hold on until Old Man Zed saved Emil, and asked the Grey Wolf if he could do it. The wolf howled. Then, the wolf attacked Kobold and was not able to hold the weapon anymore. The wolf was going great and was commanded to keep attacking. When it got closer to attack, it was defeated. Toru was astonished, and then Kobold started to step towards him. Frightened, Toru held his weapon tightly and started thinking of some better way. Toru first thought of summoning but then concluded that he didn't have anything that could hold up against a monster that defeated his enhanced Grey Wolf. Suddenly, the big Kobold plunged and put him down on the land. The kobold was looking furious, and after Toru fell, he looked at his fist and contemplated that he didn't feel any pain, thanks to the life barrier. However, his barrier was decreasing with each attack. He wondered if it was getting weaker because of Killer Wasp poison and Grey Wolf attacks, but relieved that it only gave him 1 damage, and it was on top of him. He couldn't move or even reach his spear. He concluded that he should be able to draw 1 card to his hand and might have a chance if he could draw a good card. In the worst-case scenario, he could crush the Necklace of Green Earth and generate 2 green mana to use it. He spotted the card of the Lord of Baltz Forest, a green attribute's strongest and most mana-expensive rare monster card, and he drew it. Then of all times, he didn't have enough mana to summon it, and he might be out of luck. If he had drawn it 1 card earlier, then he wouldn't have ended up in that mess. He giggled and thought that was it, as there was nothing he could do. Then it was over and there was no reset or continue. That was an impossible farm and, well, he would die. At least he tried his best. He apologized to Old Man Zed as it looked like he wouldn't be able to keep going. But suddenly, Waff came there, and she held the big kobold from behind while asking him to get away from Toru. After hearing her voice, Toru asked if she was Waff, and she agreed and added that she was there to help him. He told her to stop, but she continuously said that she would help him. He again stated that he told her that it was useless. While Waff kept trying to get the kobold away from Toru, frightened Toru told her to stop, but she stated that she would save him and would become useful. Just then, Kobold held her and threw her hard. Toru got furious, and he furiously asked what he had done to her servant. He stabbed the weapon into his eyes and mentioned that just a moment ago, he was in despair that he decided to give up. He even said his apologies to Old Man Zed and was stressed that he was giving up that easily. Normally, in a bad situation like that, the first thing he would do was to run away. But he still owed Waff thanks, and he still had his responsibilities. He stated that he was going to beat him right there, and she rushed and stabbed down the weapon and aggressively asked if it worked. But Kobold reverted, and Toru was pretty sure it reached the attack, and he was stunned it did nothing. Kobold moved in front, but he collapsed, and Toru was relieved. Suddenly, he went to check Waff, and she was mumbling that she was full and she couldn't eat anymore. Toru mentioned that she was acting so cool earlier, and now there she was having a carefree dream. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and contended that he survived. She asked if Waff was helpful to him, and he agreed and stated that she saved his life that time and thanked her. She replied that if she could be of help to him, then she was happy, and he replied that he was counting on her then on. Toru stated that they ended up pretty far away from the settlement, and he was sure that Old Man Zed had saved Emil by then. He told her to hurry up, and she rogered it. He checked and stated that he got 5 universal mana from the achievements. Suddenly, he realized that the grey wolf he lent to Old Man Zed was beaten and got worried that if he had been beaten, then something must have happened. He rushed to see, as he could hear fighting coming from inside the settlement. He reached and was stunned to see Old Man Zed and pondered that he killed so many of them all by himself. He already knew that, but that old man was one of the fighters. Then again, Old Man Zed and Emil were the only humans he knew in that world. He went closer to him and inquired how his injury was as well as about Emil. He told him that he did his part as promised. Old Man Zed apologized and mentioned that he failed to protect her. Toru asked what he meant and asked if he was alright. Zed stated she was still barely breathing but that wound. And when Toru looked at her, he was stunned that she was still alive in that condition. And that was clearly not the kind of wound that could be healed. He couldn't help and was disgusted about the results of the torture. Waff stated that with the treatment she could provide right then, and even if they treat her in a human village, there was no way. Toru mentioned that he knew that, and he showed and stated that's why he had that with him and that was the one they used to save Zed. Toru mentioned that he would use that to heal Emil, and Waff asked if he was sure and stated that if he used it, then they would have no way to help Grandpa. Toru called it alright while adding that they were there to rescue Emil, and she agreed. Toru used the card, Life Recovery, onto Emil, and she completely recovered. He was relieved that Emil should be fine then, and it even fixed her clothes. Then he asked Waff how Old Man Zed was doing, and he went towards Zed and told him that Emil was alright then. Zed smiled and applauded him, and Toru was frustrated and asked why he was smiling like that, as he was dying right then. Yet, instead of being sad or despairing, he was smiling and added that someone like him deserves to be saved more than he does. He shuffled his cards and stated that there was no way he was going to let him die. Toru started searching for a card to save Old Man Zed, and Waff asked if he had something that they could use to save him, and he denied and stated that the ones he had on his hand were Packwood, Howling Dog, Sacred Spring, Lord of Balt's Forest, Stone Fortress, and Stone Cannon. He had 3 mana and an extra 2 from the Necklace of Green Earth. Among those, only Sacred Spring had a healing effect, but it was a card with restrictions on that effect. The quickest time for the effect to activate was next turn, but according to that world's rule, that would be when the date changed. She looked and pondered that it was no use, and the old man wouldn't last until the day was over, and he couldn't use that. He might get something better if he just kept using and drew another card. And he started to draw. First, he summoned Howling Dog, and he explained that it had the ability to check the card on the top of the deck, and if the card was a spell or monster card, it would be added to his hand. The next card that he got from the ability was Tree Armor, and it was an equipment card, so it returned to the deck. In the first place, that was a type of armor that she wears like Waff's, and it increases her status, but cannot heal injuries. The other was Busy, and the one he got from the replenishment was Blessings of the Forest Spirit. He pondered that Blessing of the Forest Spirit wasn't an equipment, and it was a spell card just like physical enhancement. It was not the type where the effect wears off at the end of the turn, and if it was what he was thinking, then he could help Old Man Zed with that. Right then, Old Man Zed was pretty much at 0 health, and he might be able to save him if he strengthened him and increased his health back to 1. He contemplated using the necklace to get more mana then and wondered what if the spell only affects the monster that he summoned. But life recovery has worked before, and he was sure it would work. But what if on the next draw, he would easily pull that life recovery again, and if it were a game, he would have immediately done something without much thinking. But right then, if he had made even one wrong decision, his choice could get someone killed. He took out his necklace and was counting on the necklace. He drew the cards while pondering that he would trust his own judgment, and he activated Blessings of the Forest Spirit. And she acted on Old Man Zed, and stunned Waff exclaimed that the wounds, his muscles were closing the wounds, and added she could then treat him using the herbs. He collapsed, and Waff told Old Man Zed that it would sting a little and requested him to bear it. Toru looked at Emil and contemplated that he was glad that he was able to save both of them, and he smiled. Selunin, while watching him, called it splendid, and as she thought, he was different from the other three. And it was indeed interesting for her. She added that awareness of ignorance. He was a human being who worked hard because he knew what he was lacking. And she knew that there were people who mocked him as someone who lives in his delusional world. And some would ridicule him as a weakling, and some would call him a coward. And yet he'd learned the weight of taking a life in that world, and that time he knew the joy of saving a life. She enjoyably stated that it wouldn't be much of a problem for him as first. He did everything just for the fun of it. But he had a good eye for people. That said that he still needs to improve. Keep struggling, scream and keep spitting blood because he would need to get himself a great deal of power to be able to fight against the King of the Chaos and for his own sake. Toru stated that Chaos possessed and added that it was in the completed achievement selection, so he believed it was about that giant kobold. The black haze that covered that giant kobold, and that was what they called Chaos. Zed stated that one day Chaos suddenly appears and possesses living things, and it was said that those who got possessed become violent and gain powers they could never have before, and that what they call Chaos possessed, and it was a calamity that emerged in that world. They reached the base, and they contended that finally they were at home. He further added that after what happened, they decided that it was too dangerous to stay in the settlement, and they wanted until her mana recovered at midnight, summon Grey Wolf, and with the still unconscious Emil riding it, and they went on their way home, and they lost Howling Dog after they got attacked by small demons on their way back. But everything went well after that. Emil opened her eyes, and was stunned that she was alive, and Old Man Zed patted on her head and apologized that he was not there sooner to help her, and called it all right then. Old Man Zed further added that he wouldn't be able to help her if it weren't for Toru, and Toru stated that it wasn't true, and they only made it because of his help. Old Man Zed laughed and asked if he was getting shy again, and Toru requested him to stop, and Emil bowed and thanked both of them as well as to Waff. Toru contemplated that she was strong after all that happened to her. Just then, Waff offered her food while stating that she must be hungry and asked to drink that warm up first. Emil accepted and took a sip of it and was thrilled by its taste, and she hugged Waff, and Toru was stunned and asked if she was alright as she was hurt. But she bounced and hugged him, and Toru was shy and contemplated about the two to stop looking and to help him with that situation, and was confused about that situation. Waff expressed that he was doing great and all he needed to pat her head, and Toru wondered if Waff was serious as he was freaking otaku in his late 20s, and he patted on her head and he wondered that A was the one who was supposed to be trying to calm her down, but it felt that he feels so much calmer that he was doing this. Emil hugged him and Toru asked what was that, and she asked if she was smelling bad right then, and he stated that she was fine. Waff called Emil to the way and she asked if it would be okay, and Waff explained that Grey Wolf would be keeping watch nearby. And Toru and Old Man Zed was waiting a little further away, and Waff called it a nice figure, and she got shy and asked the what, and Waff mentioned that size made her jealous and even her butt, and Emil requested her to not say that. Toru asked the old man to say, but Zed told him to keep calm. They took bath and came out of the water, and Waff rushed towards Toru while stating that they finished bathing, and Emil ran behind her to stop as she needed to put some clothes first. But accidentally she came in front of Toru, and both got stunned and screamed in shyness. After putting on some clothes, Emil asked about taking her to the village, and Old Man Zed agreed and stated that even with the kobolds taken care of, there was still many other dangers in that woods, and they figured it would be better to take her back to the village than to keep her there for long too. And Toru added that it was not exactly safe there either. Zed added that since she was kidnapped by the bandits, she must have been living near the forest, and they could leave tomorrow and take her back. Emil mentioned that she couldn't go back and explained that she lost her parents when she was very young and had no relatives in the village, so she lived alone on the edge of the village, and if she got back then, they would just treat her like an eyesore, and she didn't know anything to rely on outside the village, and they didn't need a girl who got kidnapped by bandits. She clenched her fists and stated that by then, she was sure the villagers have thought that she was dead and already disposed of whatever little possession she left there. And that's why even if she got back, there was nowhere for her to belong there. And she begged Toru and asked if he could let her stay there, and added that she could do household chores and she would even help him with heavy work. Toru mentioned that would be helpful and added that for young men and women to live together in the woods was a bit. And she agreed and asked the old man Zed that what was he going to do after that. And he stated that since he had nowhere to go either, he was thinking about staying there for them. And she told Toru that if old man Zed was there, then were no problem. Toru requested both of them to listen and stated that he knew both of them were counting on him for this, but his power was not that useful. He held the cards and added that it wasn't his own powers, and he might even lose it tomorrow, and it was that kind of mysterious power. And the old man agreed and stated that he could see his points, and asked if the power was entirely from him to decide, and he agreed, and old man agreed and mentioned that was enough for him, and added that he looked up to him, not for his strength, but for his heart. Emil mentioned that as Toru has been helping her a lot, they haven't known each other for long, but she knew that Toru was a good person, and both smiled at Toru. He mentioned that he comprehended and they looked forward to his support, and Toru stated to reintroduce themselves and stated that his name was Yanagi Toru, and if they put it in the region's world it was Toru Willow. Old man mentioned that his name was Zed Gardman, and he could call him whatever he liked, and she mentioned that her name was Emil. And the old man asked if she was concerned about not having a family name and told her to not worry, and added that even with a family name, right then he was nothing more than an escaped slave, and it wasn't like that he was a noble either, and he come from a country where even commoners have family name, and it wasn't like he was someone important. And Waf added that it was right as her name was just Waf, and it was same as Emil, and she smiled and asked Waf what exactly was she. And Waf asked if they knew that Toru has defeated Spirit before in the first place, and both of them got astonished. Toru mentioned to talk about it next time, and Zed asked if he was summoning, and he agreed. He explained that the three of them were going to live together, then there was no way they were going to live in a cave forever. And he drew the card of the stone fortress and checked if the layout of the fort was like that. And at last he summoned it and a big fortress appeared there. They were content, and he mentioned to take a quick look inside. And he stepped forward, and Emil stated that he said himself that he only borrowed his power, but she has to say Toru himself was actually amazing, and Zed agreed to it. There was a stone soldier, and Toru mentioned that he could guard the entrance as well, told the old man to check the armory in the 10 back right room and Emil to check the 2 bedrooms on the left side. And they agreed. Old man Zed checked the armory and found a good weapon, and Waf mentioned that there was a complete set of cooking utensils in there. And Emil was amazed by the bedroom and mentioned that she never had a comfy bed before. Toru noticed the stairs and contemplated that he could go upstairs, and he got up to the roof, and he couldn't see much through that 1-story roof and thought that it could be useful when intercepting attack. He opened the book and stated that wasn't just his fight to survive anymore, and now it was the fight to survive with his friends on his back, and he needs to finish more achievement and improve his cards to make them stronger, as he would become much stronger. Selunin mentioned that she thought he would call himself Selunin. And Toru mentioned that as it was just as he said, looks like he has been reincarnated. He added that he never thought that he would be able to conquer even death, and he knew that the world exists for him. Toru contemplated that there were 4 footsteps, and they were getting closer, and heard one of them saying if it was really that way. They agreed and stated that he was sure they went that way when they split up. He thought just then, and he heard someone screaming from that way, and there was supposed to be no dangerous beast around, and something must have happened to his missing men. Just then the others, and he asked if he was him, the one who killed all his men lying around there. And Toru pondered that from their look, they were crude, vulgar, unintelligent, and plainly not so different from monkeys. He asked what if he told him that he was, and the man rushed to attack, and he killed the gravekeeper's dog in 1 hit. He was clearly much stronger than the small fry from before, and on top of that, his life barrier was reduced by 3 from the way he talks. And he must be a bandit or thief boss. Toru called it good timing and added that he could use him as his pawn for them. He drew cards, and one of them was a dark source of power, and he summoned it. The next man asked if he was a magician, And Toru replied that he was just loved by the god and added that it was time to train the stupid monkey boss. He cast total mind control, which controlled the boss of the group, and his group members asked where the monster was from earlier. Toru asked the boss to identify himself to his lord, and he stated that he was Grams. Toru told him to take him to his hideout as a companion. The others were astonished and asked what he had done to his boss, and he told them that he was doing the right thing there, so they better shut their mouth, and how dare these people, these lowlifes. He commanded Grams to kill all those small fry over there, and the boss plunged to attack. He laughed and stated that this happened because he dared to speak against him, the god's chosen protagonist, and laughed that in that free world, he would do whatever he wanted and enjoy life as he pleased. Selunin laughed and stated that even though there were bandits, he really doesn't hesitate when fighting against humans, and added she was the one who gave him the ability, but he looked like it turned out to be much uglier than he thought. He wondered what if those two ended up meeting, if he could win, and she snapped and mentioned that they would know when it happens. She entered and mentioned that it had been a while, and he opened his eyes and got stunned, and she greeted him and stated that it had been a while, and she was glad to see that he was doing well. Toru stated that he was pretty sure she was peeking in from somewhere and already knew what's going on, and she smiled at it. He told her to stop silently affirming it. He asked where he was and inquired if he was only here in spirit, and she agreed and stated that it was midnight, and added that his body was sleeping soundly in the fort, and apologized to interrupt when he was enjoying his isekai life. She added that she had something to tell her, which was why she called him there, and he pondered that he couldn't really feel my body. She inquired if he had anything to say to her, and added that they haven't seen each other for 10 days, and she was sure she had 1 or 2 things he would say to her, and he thanked her. Selunin stated that she was expecting to hear one of her grudges, but she still thanked him even after everything he went through. And he stated that it was true that he were the one who brought him there, but he was still the one who made the decision in the end, and added that he was able to get a lot of things that he couldn't get in his previous world, for that he was truly grateful. She mentioned that was the case, and added that she was glad to have chosen him for this survival game. And Toru was stunned and asked if it was news to him, and she agreed and mentioned that she never said anything about it when they first met. She explained that there were 4 reincarnated people, including him, and it was all about who would survive to the end. Although by then everyone but he was already eliminated. He asked everyone, or but him in just 10 days, and she agreed and explained that one of them was blessed with a strong body, unique skill, and legendary armor, and combined it and he got yourself a hero, and that was what he was supposed to be, but he died when he challenged a demon while being underleveled. The other one had unlimited magic power and was able to master all attributes. He even has the capability to create new magic, and he could consider him as the strongest sage, but he got stung by a poisonous insect, became unable to concentrate on his magic due to the pain and was killed by the goblins. Another one gifted with limitless growth potential, capable of obtaining all kinds of magic and skills, and he possesses the strongest growth cheat, and that was what he was supposed to be. But because he was a womanizer, he was quickly caught by beautiful robbers and died. There was him with his card game ability that he came up with, managed to survive to the end, and she asked what he thought, and he retorted that she was terrible. She laughed and agreed, and he retorted that he was talking about the fact that she made him fight for his survival with only card game ability, and she denied and stated that she was always serious when she did things, and she didn't choose that ability because she wanted him to die, and the ability she gave him, he wouldn't die in the way they did, and he agreed. Then, she stated that power was not omnipotent and advised not to let his power blind him and sweep him off his feet. And he stated that he was not planning on dying again either, and she stated that mindset was important too. That was the end of the first matter, and he asked if there was more, and she agreed and mentioned that the next game was about to begin, so she thought she should inform him about the rule change. He questioned about rule change, and she mentioned that the current turn notation was hard to understand, and he agreed and stated sometimes he was not sure how long some of the cards' effect would last, and that's why he changed it into an hour format. Although the midnight rule was still the same and he could check it as soon as he woke up. That's all she had to say and wished him the best. She reincarnated him while mentioning that he had always been a fan of his, and he asked what she meant next time, and she stated that she would be rooting for him. He asked her not to state that there were more reincarnated people coming, and he returned to his life. He sighed and whatever she wanted and woke him up like that, and even said that he changed the turn notation, and as it was important, so he decided to better check everything then. Toru inquired what happened and questioned what was with the shaking. He asked the stone soldier and spotted a stone soldier and questioned if something hit the stone soldier into the fort. He got outside and spotted bandits throwing stones at the fortress. One of the bandits laughed and stated that, as he expected, his Kai strike could kill a stone demon in a single blow. He added that they had an opening there. In return, the old man threw a stone back at them. Toru contemplated that he got an achievement there, but just what was it that gave him a bad feeling? Zed explained that the ones outside were the bandits he mentioned before, and Toru saw some familiar faces. He told Emil and Waffle to go take shelter in the armory there, and she agreed. Emil covered Waff's mouth and stated that they would go to the armory together. Toru told the stone soldier to protect those two, and he asked the old man if he could buy him some time. The old man agreed, stating that if he put it that way, he must have a plan. The other bandits got furious and asked if he was the one who did it. The boss of them stopped them and asked if he was the old man who ran away from them the other day. He stated that he was really stressed that he killed one of his buddies, but now he had to beat him up and bring him back as an example. He commanded his group not to interrupt in between their fight and added that he was going to show him where exactly he belongs. Another man advised him not to kill him by accident, as he was just a frail old man after all. Just then, the old man lunged to strike, but the bandit dodged it. He pondered that he couldn't read his movements and wondered if he was really that old man from before. The old man furiously started to try to see whether he was a frail old man or not, and the bandit agreed. On the other hand, Toru wished he could help him right away, but he needed to see the changes first. If he got into the battle without knowing it, it might be too late when he realizes it later. He looked at the books and wondered if the change on every turn was different for each card. As long as the description was correct, he would be fine. The achievement, whatever it would be nice if he could get some mana from it. He noticed that his achievement was to kill a human. He was stunned and wondered if it was because the old man killed that person earlier. Also, he was worried about why the old man got treated like his familiar. He thought it was because he used his spell card on him. If that happened when someone was affected by the card, he was stunned and thanked that he called that guy. Still, he stated that Selunin messed up in the head. The old man asked the bandit how he found that place, and he answered that it was smoke. Furthermore, the bandit added that when he got there, he couldn't find the spirit that guarded that area anywhere. All he could see was an unknown fort, and then the frail old man came out from it and pointed his sword at him. There were too many things he didn't understand, so he was going to beat him up and have him explain everything. The old man pondered that the bandit's Kai strikes and stone sword wouldn't hold against that kind of attack. He needed to use his own Kai if he wanted to win. But Toru's power only hailed the surface, and his insides were still not fully healed yet. He was not sure if his body could handle Kai in his current state, but if he could buy Toru a little time, he decided to do it. Suddenly, the sword cut his arm, and the bandit stated that he was wide open. He spotted the Lord of Balt's forest, which was summoned by Toru. The other bandits got frightened and called it a demon beast. Their boss warned them not to be cowards, and added that it might be huge, but it was just a lone beast. It wouldn't stand a chance if they attacked all at once. They decided to attack it from all sides, and they charged. Toru went to the old man and asked if he was all right. He pondered that he was hoping they would be scared off by the sight of it and run away, but he couldn't let him get away with the knowledge of that fortress anyway. He commanded the forest lord to not hold back and to kill them all. The boss mentioned that he was not afraid to fight a big dog, but the forest lord killed them all at once, and blood was on the land. Stunned, Toru contemplated that everything that was once human scattered all around and spread the smell of a mixture of blood and feces. It all happened so fast that it scared him. At that time, he ended up leaving everything to the old man and his family, but someday he would have to do it with his own hands. He looked at his hands and wondered if he would be able to kill someone if the time comes. Then he came back to his senses and commanded them to not eat the corpses, as he was going to bury them properly. The old man asked him to help him, and Toru mentioned that it would be great and asked if he was going to be alright with those open wounds. The old man stated that he would be fine as long as he didn't overdo it, and they couldn't make Emil and Waff do those kinds of things anyway. They started digging the land, and Toru mentioned that at that rate, who knows when the bandits would come snooping around there again, and added that he was thinking about attacking their hideout once he got fully healed. He further added that in 2 days he would be able to summon a card that would treat his injuries, and the old man replied that would be helpful, and might prepare himself for that. The old man Zed mentioned that it was also that important, but that thing was, he didn't know where the location of their hideout was, and since the kobolds was chasing him for a while after he escaped with Emil, And as it turns out, it was also the same for Emil, and they found a map of the forest from the bandits' belongings, but the location of their hideout was cleverly obscured as well. In the end, they decided to just grab a random bandit and get the information out of him. 2 days after the battle, he summoned the sacred spring to heal Old Man Zed's injury. After that, he continued to build up their strength by getting more achievements and daily mana recovery. Once Old Man Zed fully recovered, he went out with some of Toru's familiars accompanying him. In the fortress, Emil mentioned that it had been 2 days since Grandpa left, and asked if he thinks that Grandpa was doing right then. Toru stated that Old Man Zed had a newly summoned Balt's forest guard and pack with him, and they would know right then if something goes wrong. Then, he pondered that even a pack of wolves tokens got sent to the graveyard half a day ago, but that was the only one that came back until then. And then others were still alive. It was good, and even if he wanted to do a search, he couldn't risk leaving Emil behind to do the searching as well. On the other hand, taking her along seemed more dangerous to him, and he just needed to think of something before any more cards came back. Suddenly, the old man came back, and they all rushed to him and asked if he was alright as one of his companions got killed. The old man apologized for it and stated that those bandits were tougher than he thought and they killed one. Toru mentioned that it was alright and asked who the other person was, and the old man stated that he was the little brother of the bandit leader, and he just happened to spot him, so he went ahead and spotted him. Lloyd asked if it was Toru, the master of the demon beast, and Toru agreed, and Lloyd mentioned that he used the same kind of demon beast as the other guy, and the old man agreed and mentioned that guy summoned a beast using that kind of card.